Nicolás Maduro announces that the vaccination process against COVID-19 in Venezuela is to begin in February. In Haiti, labor unions and social movements launched a general strike this Monday against the ongoing insecurity in the country and demanding the resignation of President Jovenel Moïse. And Myanmar's national media confirmed that the nation is under military control and a state of emergency has been declared for 1 year. Hello and welcome to teleSUR English. I am Estefania Bravo from the headquarters of Quito in Ecuador. This is From the South. During an interview with journalist Bruno Altman, the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, announced that the vaccination process against COVID-19 will begin in February in the country.
The vaccines are about to arrive. I estimated last year that the truly massive vaccination was going to take place in April because with our analysis and scientific specialists, they told us that something like what is currently happening was going to happen, that there is no production capability of any vaccine at the necessary level in the world, and that what was going to happen was the hoarding of the vaccine by the North, and that is how it has been. 10 countries hoard 95% of the vaccines in the world. So in February, we should start a growing vaccination, and by April, there will be a massive vaccination.
President Maduro also provided information on the use of the Russian vaccine Sputnik V and also approved the use of the Chinese vaccine and of the vaccine candidate developed by Cuba.
We have approved the Sputnik V vaccine because we tested it in Venezuela, and it was 100% effective. The test was done, unfortunately, it did not cause any side effects. Also with China, we are testing several vaccines and waiting for the Cuban vaccine. Cuba has 4 vaccine candidates and has advanced a lot in 2 of them. One is called Soberana 2, very effective, and the other one is called Abdala. So there are 4 Cuban vaccines. 2 of them are very advanced, and those vaccines, plus the Russian vaccine and the Chinese vaccine, we have decided in the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of our America to create a vaccine bank. We're going to have a vaccine bank to distribute vaccines to all member countries of ALBA in Latin America and the Caribbean and beyond, to the countries that need them in the region.
Moving on, the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, informed that the police arrested at least 3 suspects for the attack on an electoral caravan of the Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front. The Salvadorian president explained that one of the detainees had to undergo emergency surgery due to several gunshot wounds to the abdomen. The attack on the Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front's caravan left at least 2 people dead and 5 others wounded after the attack on a campaign event by the FLMN militants in view of the legislative elections scheduled for February 28th. This event took place days after President Bukele criticized the peace accords signed between the army and the then guerrillas to end the civil war in 1992. And also in El Salvador, the coordinator of the parliamentary group and member of the political commission of the Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front, Nidia Diaz, denounced an armed attack against the party's caravan that took place on Sunday in the framework of the campaign for the legislative and municipal elections.
When the leading truck of the caravan, with sound and everything, moved towards the center, a few meters away from our facilities in the capital, a vehicle intervened and wouldn't let the truck pass, and 3 armed men got out. 2 of them shot at it. They lifted the banner of the deputies and immediately began shooting at the back of the truck, where all of our comrades were duly identified with their flags, their colors, and it was there where 4 comrades were seriously wounded. And another was grazed, and after they finished shooting, they simply got back into the car.
The coordinator of the parliamentary group publicly blamed President Nayib Bukele and his vice president for inciting the hatred and violence that resulted in the attack against the FLMN caravan, in which 2 of the wounded died.
I want to make it clear that this is the result of hatred, intolerance, and incitement to violence by the President of the Republic, Nayib Bukele. We hold him responsible and his vice president, Felix Ulloa, who yesterday in an act said that this was a new war that had begun on February 30th, 2019, with new actors. That is a call to what? When one speaks of the concept of war, one speaks of intolerance.
Cuban citizen residents in the U.S. carried out several solidarity caravans to reject the blockade that Washington maintains against the Caribbean island. Under the slogan, Bridges of Love Between Cuba and the U.S., more than 500 Cuban residents in the U.S., as well as citizens of the U.S. and other nationalities, mobilized on foot with vehicles and bicycles in the cities of Miami, New York, Seattle, and Los Angeles. During the caravan, the movement of solidarity with the Caribbean island rejected the blockade imposed by Washington while demanding the lifting of the coercive measures considered as crimes against the Cuban people. The mobilization also served to pay honors and homages to the Cuban national hero, Jose Marti, for the anniversary of 168 of his birth.
It's necessary to end the blockade now. What we need with Cuba is not hate, restrictions on travel, and family remittances. What we need now is cooperation in the fight against COVID-19. Cuba has shown that it can handle this problem in a much better way than it's been handled in the United States. We need to learn from them and work with them against this disease, which is devastating our country.
Supported the Cuban Revolution from the beginning. It's an attempt by the U.S. government to strangle the Cuban people into submission. So far, it's failed because the Cuban people survived many attempts to overthrow their revolution, and it will fail again. But I come to these protests because I think it's important to speak out against the embargo.
We're here to support the Cuban people, to help lift the U.S. blockade. It's inhumane, and also so Cuban Americans can visit their families and support them freely by sending money and whatever aid they need.
We always want to advocate for the unity of Cuba and the United States, and always continue the struggle to eliminate the embargo once and for all. Let us always remember that America is one, and Martí belongs to all of us.
On Sunday, Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro met with Cuba's Vice Prime Minister Ricardo Cabrizas to expand bilateral economic cooperation amid the COVID-19 pandemic. During the meeting in the Venezuelan capital, Caracas, the two leaders discussed how to expand their trade and relations in the health, culture, technology, agriculture, sports, and tourism sectors. Referring to the meeting, Venezuelan President tweeted, "Today, the brotherhood started by commanders Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez continues to advance despite the difficulties, and also affirmed that bilateral cooperation will benefit the economic development of both nations." Meanwhile, the Cuban Deputy Ministry noted we need each other to halt COVID-19 in this economic crisis that has caused, stressing the collaboration between Cuban and Venezuelan doctors will help to overcome the pandemic. Haiti labor unions and social movements launched a general strike this Monday against the ongoing insecurity in the country while demanding the resignation of President Jovenel Moïse. Groups of workers started the strike action with various street mobilizations in Port-au-Prince to reject the high levels of violence affecting the population. Unions have denounced that the policies implemented by the government of Moïse directly affects the salaries, while rejecting the constitutional reform the government is pushing, stressing that it does not benefit workers. Meanwhile, social and political movements opposed to the current government also joined the strike action, rejecting the reform of the constitution, which they denounced was a move solely aimed at securing Moïse's continuity in power. In Ecuador, with just a few days to go before the general elections, leader of the Citizens Revolution Party have denounced that foreign media are conducting a smear campaign against the presidential candidate of the Union for Hope coalition, Andrés Arauz. According to the movement, this media campaign seeks to discredit the leader and prevent his participation in the upcoming presidential election on February 7th. The Union for Hope coalition denounced the attempts to implicate the candidate in alleged irregular financing of his campaign. In this regard, several Latin American leaders have raised their voices to reject this latest attempt of the Ecuadorian opposition to push for the suspension of the general elections to be held on Sunday. Leaders of Latin America and the world demand transparency and equal conditions in the elections to be held on February 7th in Ecuador. The president of Argentina, Alberto Fernández, as well as the former president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, and Bolivian leader Evo Morales raised their voices this weekend in rejection to the new attempt of the opposition to the suspension of general elections scheduled for next Sunday. Colombian Senator Gustavo Petro and the platform Espacio Futuro, Future Space, which gathers leaders from Latin America and Spain, also ratified their rejection of the national far-right wing's attempts to ignore the will of the people of Ecuador. In this sense, the CNE reaffirmed that the general elections will be held on Sunday, February 7th, as stipulated in the electoral calendar. Austria will start relaxing its third coronavirus lockdown from February 8th, as announced on Monday by Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, with schools, museums, and shops set to reopen. Services such as hairdressers and beauticians will also be allowed to reopen, but customers will have to show proof of a negative coronavirus test. Meetings of people from more than 2 households will once again be allowed, but the Chancellor pleaded for social contacts to be kept to a minimum. He said the government would reassess the situation in 2 weeks to see if it would be possible to reopen restaurants and cafes or restart cultural events. But he warned the government could also reintroduce restrictions if infection numbers began to rise. One of the few exceptions of the wide-ranging shutdown in recent weeks has been ski resorts, which have stayed open for local visitors despite several reported outbreaks. While the country was spared in the first wave of the pandemic, it has been hard hit by the second wave and suffered more than 7,800 COVID-19 deaths.
We are far from the ideal scenario of a 7-day incidence of around 50 cases per 100,000 inhabitants, or in other words, 700 infections per day. We are rather around 1,000 to 1,500 infections per day. We have therefore unanimously decided, together with all religions and the government, to take cautious, easing measures, but at the same time to introduce additional security and hardening measures.
Emirates Airline announced on Monday it would make daily deliveries of coronavirus vaccines to countries with low storage capacities as part of an initiative to accelerate global jab distribution. The Dubai-based company, flag carrier of the United Arab Emirates and the largest in the Middle East, will use both its cargo and passenger fleets to deliver vaccines to countries without the means to stockpile vaccines, according to the deputy head of its cargo division. Dubai, a key transport hub, announced the initiative on Sunday to accelerate the delivery of the coronavirus vaccines, particularly to developing nations after the World Health Organization warned against abandoning the world's poor. The alliance will see joint efforts between pharmaceutical manufacturers, forwarders, and government agencies to transport vaccines, some of which have to be kept at very cold temperatures.
There is no doubt that this initiative will play a major role in delivering vaccines in an urgent and safe manner, and the role of Emirates Airline during the next stage will be a fundamental role in activating this issue in a safe manner. The problem that we face in most countries of the world today is the lack of capabilities to store these vaccines in a safe way, and therefore storing them here in Dubai and re-exporting them to other countries in small quantities is the best way that we have found to transport vaccines to most countries in a safe manner.
South Africa on Monday took delivery of its first shipment of coronavirus vaccines, a move paving the way to the first phase of the inoculation in Africa's worst-hit country. Another 500,000 doses of the vaccine are expected later this month. The jabs will be administered to some 1.2 million healthcare workers, the key target in the first phase of vaccination. Injections will start to be administered in about 2 weeks after the vaccines go through quarantine, regulatory and quality control procedures. With at least 1.45 million detected infections and more than 44,000 cases, Africa has the second number of cases and deaths in the region. The authorities plan to vaccinate at least 67% of the population, or 40 million people, by year's end. South Africa has received its first shipment of coronavirus vaccines. President Cyril Ramaphosa said the arrival of the Oxford AstraZeneca doses signals that the country can turn the tide on the disease.
The arrival of these vaccines contains the promise that we can turn the tide on this disease that has caused so much devastation and hardship in our country and across the world.
On Sunday, Myanmar's national media confirmed that the nation is under military control and a state of emergency has been declared for 1 year. According to the national channel Madawi, the former general and vice president of the nation, Mint Sui, was installed as interim president after considering as irregular the elections held on November the 8th. Hours before, the spokesperson of the National League for Democracy in Myanmar, Myo Myunt, indicated that the army had arrested the state councillor Aung San Suu Kyi and other high government officials. For its part, military television announced on Monday that 1 year term of office was transferred to the army chief Min Aung Hlaing, during which time the current vice president Mint Sui will serve as interim president. Since last October 8th, when Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy won the parliamentary elections, winning 396 out of the 476 seats, the losing parties linked to the army alleged fraud. In Myanmar, residents were on Monday grappling with a return to a military rule after just a few years of democratic government. In the main city, in Yangon, pro-military demonstrators formed a convoy and drove down the streets to show their support for the move, which came just hours before the newly elected parliament was due to convene. But those who backed Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy, which according to official results of last November's elections won the polls by a landslide victory, have so far remained calm. The NLD undoubtedly has huge support in much of the country, including in Yangon. With the situation still developing, its backers have stayed silent, but expressions of anger and disbelief were still evident.
How can we believe that they will stick to that 1 year period? Based on what? There have been other things in the past we couldn't believe them over. There will be a solution when all the people unite.
We have a lot of struggle right now, for food, for life in general, for health, you name it. People have got the COVID problem, and now we have a coup. We were about to be okay, and now this happens. What do we have to do to survive?
And staying in Myanmar, where acting President Mint Sui met with top army officials in Nay Pyi Taw this Monday after the military's takeover under a 1 year state of emergency. Mint Sui was already the army-appointed vice president when he was named to take over after the military arrested civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Immediately after he was named president, Mint Sui handed power to the country's top military commander, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing. Under Myanmar's 2008 constitution, in cases of national emergency, the president can hand over power to the military commander-in-chief. The 64-year-old military leader is due to retire soon, clearing the way for him to take a civilian leadership role if the junta holds elections in a year's time as promised. Beijing calls for all parties in Myanmar to resolve their differences after the military seized power and detained democratically elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi.
China is a friendly neighbor of Myanmar and hopes the various parties in Myanmar will appropriately resolve their differences under the constitutional and legal framework to protect political and social stability.
And supporters of Myanmar's leader Aung San Suu Kyi protested alongside Thai activists outside Myanmar's embassy in Bangkok on Monday after the military moved to seize control of Myanmar for 1 year. Suu Kyi and other senior politicians were reportedly detained in the dawn hours. The announcement by the military and the declaration of a state of emergency came on the morning where the country's new parliament session was set to convene, with new members sworn in following November's elections. Protesters in Bangkok, many of whom are migrant workers from Myanmar, wore shirts, and held flags with symbols of Suu Kyi's National League of Democracy Party. Thai activists also joined in condemnation of the act, saying it was a coup that was destroying progress in the nation. Police later moved in to disperse the crowd, consisting mostly of Thai activists who tried to discontinue their protests on the main road.
Our leader has been arrested. And we feel broken. We heard the news at 5:30 and we came here to protect our country. We want Aung San Suu Kyi to come out from the jail.
The coup d'etat is like a cancer that destroys progress and development of the people in all countries.
Thousands of protesters rallied against coronavirus lockdown measures in Vienna, defying authorities who had banned the gathering. Vienna police said they ordered the rally to disband after participants failed to abide by the pandemic restrictions, such as wearing masks and respecting social distancing rules. Protesters included members of Austria's far-right movement. Police said several people were detained and are facing charges. In the United States, the latest winter storm to wall up the Northeast shut down vaccination sites and other pandemic-related services in many states that could see as much as a foot of snow. The National Weather Service said the storm developing off the mid-Atlantic coast will move slowly as it brings heavy snow and strong winds through Tuesday. Snows had made its way through Pennsylvania and into New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. Due to the weather, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy closed the state's 6 mega sites that distribute COVID-19 vaccines. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also be sure to follow us on our social media accounts. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram as well. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. See you next time.